Welcome to episode 12 of the Battle Academy podcast. My name is Monica. You may know me in-game as Anthissa or on social media as Anthissa21. And I'd like to start this episode off by first apologizing for not having this done last week. Things got a little crazy and I was not able to prepare a warning ahead of time. Unfortunately, instead of having my episode ready last week like it should have been, I have it for you this week. So again, my apologies as I'm trying to work through a lot of different things all at once. All right, now that that is taken care of, thank you so much if you're still listening to the show and you've been with me since episode 1. If you're just now joining for this very first episode, welcome and thank you. It is October 7th. And this week's episode is going to be a little bit different. Normally, I'd probably do something relating to Ultra League right now. I wanted to do some Ultra League spicy picks, but some information came up just before last week that has kind of, I think, been a bit of buzz in the community. It's not fully outright buzzing through the community, but on the Lured Up podcast, they did a Poke the Bear session about it, and it ended up creating a lot of noise. So this week, instead of actually doing anything battle related, we're going to talk about the rollback that has happened on the play at home bonuses that Niantic has worked out. I think this is one of those things that kind of warrants a special episode because of how it's going to affect everybody in the long run. I will precede all of this by saying these bonuses were never meant to be 100% permanent. Some things are staying and are going to be permanent, some things are not, and some things have been rolled back already to an extent. Again, I never expected any of this to be permanent. I do appreciate that some things are going to be permanent. However, my personal opinion on this, I will give in a little bit. I think it's kind of important. If you haven't been reading any of this, or you're just now finding out, or whatever, because you never know, people are busy. It is the first week of the fall, first couple of weeks of the fall, and there are people going back to school, there are people going back to college and doing things like that. Or if you're in college, you may be on a condensed schedule and you're too busy focusing on your midterms that are coming up or what have you. So you may not have noticed this one, but I think it's important that the community get an opportunity to speak their mind about it. And hopefully Niantic will listen to this and take the appropriate action necessary. If you are not aware of what has been rolled back, what is staying, and what is just kind of hanging in limbo at the moment, I'm going to go over that information. The article that I'm going through is we need to talk about the stay-at-home bonus changes on PokemonGoHub.net. This was written by kittypokemonsalot. I know her on Instagram. Great person. She does great articles. So I really was excited when she was the one that had written this. So I knew it was going to be an interesting breakdown of what all has happened. So let's start first with what the good part of this is. Remote raiding is staying. It is said to be staying for the time being in their official thing. And I'll try and link that as well in the podcast description. If Niantic is wise, they will realize that remote raiding is a good cash source for them. Plus, now that we have it, we kind of don't want to give it up if they try to take it away. I believe there's going to be some problem and some uprising and some complaining about that going away. So hopefully remote raiding will become a permanent feature. It's great. You get to interact with people from all over the world. You get badges from gyms you may never ever visit in your life. And you get to spend some time hanging out with your buddies, whether you're physically there or not. So that is a feature I hope they make permanent. They have not brought back the walking distance requirement for Go Battle League yet. This is a yet situation. I do foresee them bringing it back at some point. Hopefully they will keep it to a 1 to 2K per match set. In my opinion, I think 1 to 2K is more achievable for everybody. as opposed to the 3K, which meant you had to do 15 kilometers if you wanted to do all 5 sets. That equals to about 10 miles. People don't walk that much in a day. Even hardcore gamers don't, I think. So I think this would be a better option, and you won't find yourself spending coins on it all the time. Plus, with the pandemic, more people are playing Go Battle League, so keeping it accessible to everybody works in their favor. Increased gym Pokestop spin distance is staying, so that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I actually did receive a community comment about this, so I will be going into that in a little bit in the later half of the show. This is great because if a Pokestop spin disc happens to be in a situation where even if you're walking up to it and you look like you should be standing right on top of it, it could be awkwardly positioned and you'd have to worry about how you're going to hit it exactly. Plus, there are some Pokestops that I have encountered that actually end up being indoors. So GPS doesn't work perfectly indoors and it can cause some problems. So having that extra distance really, really helps. Plus, if you're going to an area that you're driving around hitting stops and everything, you can safely access it from your car without having to get out and risk some kind of problem or issue or coming in contact with a person closer than the 6 feet guidelines. So keeping that is definitely a plus. Permanent changes that they have announced include gift inventory limit is 20. This is a wonderful thing because it'll allow you to send gifts more often, get more XP more often, get items that you may need more often, Pokeballs, potions, berries, what have you. Plus you get a little Stardust boost as well. And the XP that comes off of it is a nice little bonus as well if you're still XP grinding or you're still working your way to 40. You will also continue to receive the 3 times catch Stardust and 3 times catch XP bonus for your first catch of the day, which is a nice little boost. I know I've heard some people say they didn't really notice it, but I noticed it a little bit. I'm still working on the grind to 40, and I've got about 1.5 million to go, so that little boost every day just makes me a little bit happier. Plus the fact that it goes up a little bit every day is really nice, as long as you keep your streak going, of course. Then, of course, the incense will stay at 60 minutes. The incense is a bit of a touchy subject, and I kind of understand why a lot of people are having issues with it. We'll go into the downside of the incense situation in a little bit, but staying at 60 minutes is wonderful. It's going to be that way for just about everything. So that makes it a lot easier to manage, and plus you don't feel like you've been cut off once your incense kicks out. Not to mention being able to stack the incense and the Stardust now has been a godsend, so you don't have to worry about pulling it out. You can just keep catching. Incubators are going to be included in more boxes in the shop. This one is iffy. I think that's just for now and for certain events. However, there is a downside to the incubators as well as to the incense, and I will get to the downsides here in a little bit. And of course, the bad. Gifts are no longer going to be guaranteed from Pokestops. This is the downside of the gift situation. And your buddy will only bring you gifts from nearby Pokestops once a day when you get low to having no gifts to send. This is going to be a problem. Some of us rely on gifts for getting items because we're stuck in a rural, isolated area. So having our buddy be able to go get gifts for us and bring them back it really helps so much. And the fact that this is now being kicked down to maybe 1 or 2 gifts from your buddy once a day, it's going to hurt with the gift-giving game. I don't know if Niantic realizes how much those gifts going back and forth really mean for terms of Stardust or XP or potions and revives. My kid's sister, I play with her a lot, and she struggles sometimes with raids and everything, and she runs out of revives and heals and potions and such. So having those come from gifts really, really helps her. And having her buddy fetch those gifts helps so much as well, because our family's kind of on a voluntary lockdown of sorts. We have been since about April, and for this next month, we're about to make it even harder of a lockdown because our community is kind of like upside down where the COVID situation is concerned. So for her and my kid brother, having those gifts come in meant so much. We are no longer getting that. I think this is a huge problem. So yes, you still have the 20 that you can send out per day, the 20 you can open. However, you won't be getting them as frequently, especially not from Pokestops. I believe I've heard a couple people say they were almost out of Pokestops or Poke gifts to send, and Pokestops only gave them about 1 or 2 out of the several they had spun. So, and again, if you're wondering about any of this, this all went into effect at the beginning of the month. So you can kind of see how this is going to be causing a problem. I've had somebody in the community tell me that they've noticed that their friends are no longer sending gifts as regularly, and this could possibly be why. Rural players, the gifts that we're getting, those are essential to our gameplay. And I wonder if Niantic really notices that. Again, a lot of this feels like rural players are getting a bit of the short end of the stick on this. And that was the bad section. The ugly is what's coming up next. And this is the stuff that is causing the most buzz in the community, I believe. Second place for most noise is going to be the egg distance, reverting back to proper. I can kind of see us doing okay with egg distance being back to regular to an extent. I wasn't hatching as many eggs to begin with beforehand. I don't think I'm hatching as many now because I'm trying to be frugal with my Pokecoins and spend them on things that I need. Mainly, I'm looking for remote raid passes and Pokeballs because, again, I'm not getting out as often as I should because of COVID concerns. So needing to have enough Pokecoins to buy Pokeballs if I need them is kind of an essential at this point. So the egg distance reverting back to normal, I can see where people are going to be upset over that, especially with this fashion event that we had. They had an exclusive Pokemon in eggs, so I can see how reverting it just before the event would cause some issues. Granted, the event was not supposed to be an egg event, but it is going to cause some problems for people because you've put an exclusive Pokemon in the egg pool. So you can kind of see how that would cause a problem. Now, the biggest bit of noise, however, is being made over this next thing, and that is the incense effectiveness will now only be increased while walking. This is a huge, huge, huge issue in my mind. To me, giving that bonus only while walking is going to have a problem because a lot of us we're getting the increased spawns. That's nice, but the spawns don't replenish as quickly as the incense would give them to you. Having the incense bonus was wonderful, especially for community days. Now, I'm not saying the incense bonus needs to stay forever. Don't think I'm saying that. It's going to be adjusted at some point. However, the adjustment doesn't need to be like this, especially during a pandemic when not everybody in the world has a safe place to go walking. I personally live in a rural area. I have noticed that GPS on my phone does not like to play nice indoors, so walking in the house doesn't always work out. Yes, I am lucky enough and I will say privileged enough to live in a situation where I can do a pretty sizable back and forth from my front door to my back door. But in what normal family size would consider this to be a large house, there's a lot of people in this house, so things kind of get in the way. Walking indoors for Pokemon and eggs and incense is not feasible. So I have to walk. If I'm going to walk, my two options are either A, up and down the gravel driveway, or B, around the block and hope that I don't get hit by a car going 30 miles over the speed limit because I live in a rural area and cars in rural areas do not obey the speed limits. No matter what police, whatever you've got watching it, you know there's going to be people speeding down the road. So the means of safely walking is extremely limited. And then there are going to be people who live in apartment situations and don't have that ability. They can't walk in their building, and then they don't have a driveway to walk up and down, and they may be in a situation where even walking on the sidewalk is dangerous. So the incense becomes an issue. And I know that in the official brief, they said, we want you to do this safely within the guidelines of your community. There's a problem with this because, in my opinion, doing the incense effectiveness like this, where it's only increased while walking, you're basically incentivizing going outside, essentially. There are several countries still on lockdown. A friend of mine in Australia only gets 2 hours a day outside, period, to exercise, and she's told me that there are issues with even that, and I will get into these community comments here in just a second on the back half of the show. And again, thank you to the people who reached out to me and gave me comments, and I will credit you guys here in a minute when I get into the back half of the show. And basically, the whole situation where the incense is concerned, it's not looking pretty, and that's the one that is going to cause the most problems, I think. And again, it's looking pretty weird. All right. I think that's going to do it for the front end, just kind of covering the situation. The back half of the show, like I said, this is going to be a special episode. I'm not going to do the shameless self-promo plug. I'm not going to do my usual features, AP Battle Academy or the Pokemon of the Week or what have you. I'm just going to strictly stick to this. So I'm going to take a moment, get me some water, and then I'm going to go into these community comments and concerns from the couple of people that reached out to me and go over some of that so you guys have an idea of what all people in the community are thinking. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back in just a second. Alrighty. Welcome back to the second half of the show, and like I said, I'm not going to do any of the usual stuff that I usually do for an episode. We're just going to get right into it on the community comments. I posted in my Instagram, posted on Twitter, posted across a couple of Discords that I'm a part of. Let's talk about the bonus changes. I want to talk about what you guys think. What are your opinions? What are your comments? And, positive or negative, let me hear what you think about this. And I had some wonderful responses. First one is from Pogo Snapped on Instagram, who said, spin distance should be permanent. It drastically improves the game flow. I agree with this. I agree with this wholeheartedly. Being able to safely access stops during this situation means so much. You can just do your normal run and you don't have to worry about how much closer do I need to get to this stop? Do I have to get out of my car if I am in a situation where COVID is running rampant or something? I love these increased stop spins because I can just hit all these stops I wouldn't have been able to before. And thank you so much again, Pogo Snapped, for the comment. I truly appreciate you leaving that for me. The next comment that I got, it actually ended up being a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine from across the pond. His username on Instagram is Big Blue Winky, and I have talked with him a couple times, both on Instagram and in Discord. He's a member of the Pogo Photo Discord, which is a lot of wonderful people to hang out with. So if you're ever interested and you see their ad for whatever come up in somebody's stories, by all means, just come ahead and join us. And he said that this is absolute madness. You have to wonder what goes through the heads of those Niantic. For starters, this pandemic is not over despite what some people seem to think. So encouraging people to go out just for a game is incredibly reckless. Other bonuses for staying at home are somewhat redundant now, with the most useful stay-at-home features back to normal. Ironically, this is the first move in a long time that Niantic has made that goes against encouraging pay-to-play. Nobody is going to spend money on the now useless incense. I have heard that comment so many times. The incense is now useless because it has been reverted back to normal unless you are walking. Walking doesn't always fully work in a house. Sometimes it basically feels like having that incense bonus is incentivizing people to go outside. And as he said, the pandemic isn't over, despite what people want to think. I live in the southern United States, specifically West Tennessee. Our governor has decided that it's perfectly okay to open the state back up. My particular county had set in place in July a mask mandate that was basically completely unenforced. and they allowed it to expire at the end of September, thinking, well, it didn't do anything. Well, it didn't do anything because you didn't enforce it to do anything. The cops are walking around without masks on themselves. Our parks are technically closed, and yet when I go spin stops from my car, I still see herds of people everywhere without masks on. Cops are supposed to be enforcing this and writing fines to anybody who's out and about walking in the park, and I'm not seeing or hearing anything about that actually happen. I know I've heard a couple times in the media that people in Australia are getting written fines because they are playing Pokemon Go because they're out for longer than 2 hours. So they're at least enforcing their situation, and my situation in the South isn't the only one that's like this. There are other people who are saying, hey, our government is handling this badly. And then there are other people who are going, we're hitting a second wave. This is not a good idea. And I told him, I've heard several people say it's useless and it's really bad timing as some countries are hitting a second wave. And they are. He says, it really doesn't work at all when I'm in the same place, so it's proper useless now. Be alright if I'm in his home. Got a lot of open space he can walk about, but not many others have that luxury, though, and I'm fairly sure we'll be hitting a second wave soon, too, especially with our inept leaders. I'm trying to figure out what Niantic's game is. That's the whole thing, because making the incense useless like this, people aren't going to spend money on something that's not going to work the way they want it to work. So you begin to wonder, you're not buying the incense because you don't like how it works anymore. So they've got to wonder why they're losing money on something that worked perfectly fine for the current situation that they have now changed. So hopefully, at least from a monetary point, they will see that leaving the incense in this new, I guess, limbo kind of situation is not going to work out at all. So again, thanks again to Big Blue Winky for those comments about the incense. I think that's a huge talking point for everybody to really think about. The last set of comments I got comes from my friend Espion Willow. She is in Australia and she's the one telling me about the situation there. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions with me. I really appreciate it. She says, I'm going to mainly mention the incense. It's difficult in my city as we are still under lockdown. We can go out for 2 hours exercise a day, but some people here don't think that playing Pokemon is allowed, so they don't risk doing it. I think the thing here is the wording. Do they really consider a game to be going out and exercising? Yes, the whole point of Pokemon Go is go out and go, but, does it really count as actual exercise because it's a video game? It gets into a little bit of a blurry area there. And she says, after some people don't risk doing it, it was most obvious on Spotlight Hour as a lot of people in my local raid group would drop an incense. It's also going to affect Community Day because we won't be able to enjoy the whole event, as even if we do go out, we can only do so for 2 hours. Although I realize the incense was never going to be that way forever, I think it's too soon to have removed the stationary bounds, with places either still in lockdown or others considering bringing restrictions back. Even in countries like the US, where there aren't restrictions in place, I feel that during events like Community Day, the limiting of this could even encourage people to congregate in their local park again. I think a better solution would have been to maybe change it so that spawns when stationary are every minute instead of the 30 seconds it was. Or limit the bonus to only special events, Community Day, Spotlight Hour, or once a day. Or even just allow people to do an at-home exercise to activate it, like using a treadmill or exercise bike, or walking around the house yard, as I believe those activities will still count as stationary unless I'm wrong. I agree with this wholeheartedly. One of the things that I want eventually is for some kind of Fitbit to Pokemon Go integration so that I don't always have my phone on me. So having something like a fitness band that connects to, without it being like a Go Plus or whatever, being something that I already have the fitness band. I don't have a Go Plus. So this way I don't have to spend extra money on like a Go Plus or something. Not necessarily to catch Pokemon with, but just count my steps so I get the egg hatches and the weekly distance bonus. Because I miss out on that all the time because I don't always have my phone on me. So that would be nice. That's just a little sidestep there. But yeah, I agree. In places like the US, having that incense be the way it is now, you're going to get people to start congregating when they shouldn't. The pandemic is not over. That is the huge thing here, and that's the huge thing I think some people don't get. Her next comment on this is, I've also found that giving and receiving gifts is a lot more difficult now because you aren't guaranteed a gift from a spin. I find that when I come back from my walk, I still don't have my max amount of gifts. And when I have given them all out, my buddy will only bring me one more, which hardly seems worth it in the scope of things. Likewise, I think that people aren't sending gifts as much anymore as they are finding the same thing. I don't receive anywhere near as many gifts anymore, and neither does my husband. I don't have much of an opinion on eggs as I'm not someone that does a lot of egg hatching. While the less distance ultimately is going to affect my hatches, I found when it was half distance, most of the hatches I get were really average at best. I hope the hatches improve with the distance back to normal, but I can't tell at the moment. Again, SBN Will, thank you so much for your input and your comment. It means a lot to me that I can get this out and let people hear what is going on in other places. And again, this is what I mentioned earlier. The issue with the gifts is going to be a bit of a problem. It is a way some people rely on getting XP, and it is a way that some people rely on getting items when they can't get out to spin. Having those gifts is a wonderful thing, especially if you're trying to, say, get enough Galarian Pokemon out of the 7k eggs so that you can hit the level up that you need. The gifts being inhibited like this, your buddy only brings you one at the end of the day or whatever, you can't really properly send gifts like that, especially if you only have a limited amount of time, and during that limited amount of time, you're not even getting all the gifts you want to get anyway, not even hitting the max 20. So the gifts and the incense are going to be the biggest problems for the community, I feel. And I think Niantic needs to relook at everything, because this isn't just a USA thing. This is affecting everybody around the world. We're still dealing with this pandemic, and places are going to consider putting restrictions back in. Overall, yes, they are eventually going to roll back the bonuses. This is something we just have to accept. Unfortunately, the timing for doing that is not right now. And I think Niantic has really missed the mark on this. So hopefully they will get enough community input back from all of this that they realize, hey, we messed up. We did a misstep here. We need to take it back and fix this so it doesn't look like we're encouraging people to go outside to play again, because that is going to cause some problems. There are some who would say Niantic isn't forcing this situation. And namely, yes, I'm going to say I listened to last week's episode of the Lured Up podcast, and Ken is right on a point. Niantic isn't really forcing anybody to play the game. But there is an issue here. When the pandemic started, there was an influx of people playing Pokemon Go because they had nothing else to do. Yes, they could pick up a controller and play another game, but they chose to play Pokemon Go. Because of that choice, Niantic has at least some responsibility to make sure that when they change the system that they've built to make it easier to play at home, they don't create a situation that looks like it's incentivizing people to go outside and play in the middle of a pandemic, especially when we've just learned from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which is the huge health and disease organization for the United States, that this virus is actually airborne and 6 feet may not be enough anymore. So in my opinion, I believe Niantic really needs to rethink the situation, because they do have a responsibility to be responsible, at least for the consideration of their players. In the end, no, they can't control whether or not people go outside, but they can control how their bonuses are set up and how their gameplay mechanics are set up to make sure that they're setting up a situation where you can still comfortably play at home without feeling like you have to go outside to get gifts or use the bonus on the incense. Again, yes, the bonuses are going to roll back. That is something we have to prepare for. However, rolling them back right now is really, really bad timing, and it looks really bad on Niantic for doing so. All right, that's gonna do it for me for this episode. If you have any thoughts or opinions on any of this, you want to reach out to me, have a discussion. I'm already setting up to have some kind of discussion about this with Ken from Lured Up Podcast. I don't know exactly how that's going to go down, but I'm looking forward to having a discussion about this. I think it's going to play out kind of like an opposing side situation. Not entirely sure. But if you want to reach out to me, give me your comments and ideas, thoughts, whatever, by all means, please do so. You can reach me on my Twitter, Anthissa21, Instagram, Anthissa.21, or you can hit me at my email, anerdblog@gmail.com. That is all the further I'm going on giving my information out. I do not want this to turn into an ad for anything. I think this is more important than promoting all of my stuff where you can hit me at or support me or whatever. I wanted this episode to be about the community. So again, if you have anything to add to this conversation, if you want to give me your thoughts and opinions, whether you agree with me or you don't, please feel free to contact me. My contact information will be in the description of this podcast, as well as my resources, the article from kittypokemonsalot, and as well as I think I'm going to tag Niantic's original post for rolling back the incentives as well. And thank you so much for joining me. I feel like this was an important discussion that needed to be put out there. And yes, I want to make it a discussion. Let's talk. All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Finally, we'll get right back to your regularly scheduled Battle Academy programming next week. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful time of day it is, wherever you're at, whatever time of day it is. Have a good one.